Good afternoon, everyone. And I'm Sarah Pooley, and I am indeed the Dean of the University of Law campuses at Southampton and Guildford, but also at Reading. So three campuses that I run. And it's my job today to talk to you about the routes to becoming a solicitor. And in particular, I'm talking today about the SQE and the LPC. So without further ado, I'm going to talk about the routes into practice. Let's just see where we are in terms of those routes to becoming a solicitor. And in particular, I think it's really important for you to understand whether or not you're able to use the transitional arrangements that are in place, or whether you have no choice and have to do the SQE. So let's take a look at those routes now and also take on board the relevant timelines. So in terms then of the traditional route, if you like, the route that existed before the SRA made any changes, well, that is that you needed to study the legal practice course and have a 2-year training contract before you could be admitted as a solicitor. Now, in order to avail yourself of that route, you needed to have an undergraduate law degree in this jurisdiction or a law conversion course. Now, what has happened is that the SRA have changed how you train to become a solicitor, but there is a transitional arrangement. So if you began your undergraduate law degree before September 2021, so before the 21st of September 2021, so in other words, you're a second year or a third year at the moment, well, then you can continue on this legal practice training contract route. If you had a degree in something else, but then went on to do a conversion course and you were enrolled on that conversion course by the 31st of August 2021. So in other words, you've either completed your old style graduate diploma in law, or you're in the second year of your part-time graduate diploma in law, well, then you too can keep going on this route. So the interesting thing about this route is that the legal practice course is a one-stop shop. It is a course with teaching and assessments. You purchase the course, and within that you get the assessments as well. Now, hold on to that piece of information because the SQE is very different. Having been through the legal practice course and passed the assessments, you would then conduct a 2-year training contract. That's normally with one organisation, and there are requirements around this. You need to have exposure to contentious work as well as non-contentious, so litigation as well as transactional work. Usually you would be moving around the firm. Usually there are 4 seats of 6 months duration, so you get an exposure to all sorts of different types of work. And then to be admitted, again, a crucial piece of information, you are being assessed effectively during that training contract by the firm, and they sign you off as competent. That's the final hurdle to admission. Now, the new process is very different. So this is the blue route. So if you are able to use the legal practice and training contract route, well, then you can equally use the new route if you wish to. If, however, you started your undergraduate law degree more recently than September 2021, you're a first year, or you haven't yet done a conversion course, or you started a conversion course this year, a new one, a new style conversion course, well, then you have to go through the new route. The new route is very different. What the SRA say here is that you must pass SQE1 and SQE2, and they're sitting just beneath, just beyond, as I call it, the roundabout on my slide. So you have to pass some assessments. The Solicitors Qualifying Examination Stage 1, which we'll look at shortly, that is a knowledge assessment, and Solicitors Qualifying Examination Stage 2, which is a skills assessment. And that's it. You don't have to have a law degree. You don't have to have a conversion. You don't have to do a preparation course. You just have to pass the exams. Now, before we all think about just running away and having a go, you'll see that it's expensive to take the exams, and you'll also see when I cover what's in them that they are challenging. So I think it is not impossible to pass these exams without a law degree or a conversion course, for reasons that I will show you. and that it would be well advised to do a preparation course as well. They are expensive and they're challenging, and it's the preparation courses that tee you up for that. And you can see on my slide that the University of Law delivers freestanding SQE preparation courses, as well as a more broader course called the LLM in Legal Practice SQE 1 and 2. And I'll cover off what's in those shortly. And then on this new route, it's not a 2-year training contract, it's 2 years qualifying work experience, and that is different. So this 2 years, 2 years full-time work experience can be gained at up to 4 organisations, and those organisations don't have to pay you. It could be voluntary work, like the Citizens Advice Bureau or a university legal advice clinic. So you gain your 2 years qualifying work experience at up to 4 organisations, but you must be signed off as having completed that by a solicitor qualified in this jurisdiction. Now, that qualifying work experience is different to a training contract. You don't have to do contentious work. You could just be in one department for the entire time. And you are being signed off as having had exposure to at least 2 of the requirements on the SRA's statement of competency that you can see on their website. So you can easily access that and to see what knowledge and skills they're talking about in that statement. And then you're admitted as a solicitor. So you need the components, you need to have passed the assessments and done the qualifying work experience. But the qualifying work experience isn't the same hurdle as the training contract. Remember, the training contract, you were being effectively assessed as to whether you were competent. The qualifying work experience doesn't do that. It's just whether you've had exposure to knowledge and skills. The hurdle, the actual signing you off and admission, comes from taking and passing SQE2. Okay, well, let's take a look then at some courses, and let's get the headlines first of all. In terms of the University of Law, it doesn't matter which courses you're on, whether you're doing the LPC or whether you're doing the SQE preparation, then the learning style is the same. You're sophisticated learners, you are by now, you'll have done an undergraduate degree, and so we don't sit you down in serried ranks and lecture to you. There's preparation to do, but the meat of the matter is in a workshop where you're engaging with the materials and being able to show that you can manipulate legal documentation, you can understand how to problem solve in relation to the context you're dealing with, so you're fully engaging with your preparation. There's tutor interaction, obviously, absolutely fundamental to helping you with that engagement. And then after the workshop, you would then consolidate. And for the SQE, you'll see consolidation is very much focused on that SQE examination. Along the way, it's our job to help you as much as we can. And in order to do that, we have various support systems in place for you. So starting then at the top right, we have an employability team who obviously are focused upon legal employment and are able to assist you with your CV, your applications, your preparation for interview, assessment centres, and so on. So their job very much to help you to secure that training contract or that qualifying work experience, or indeed a paralegal role if that's what you're looking for, or a vacation scheme. Elite is our virtual learning environment where all the documents are, all your learning materials and your books are all stored so that you can access them. Also through Elite, you can access our library services and all those key legal databases that you know, LexisNexis, Westlaw, and so on, you can access through there. We also have a team of student journey advisors who, right from your application throughout your course, will be there looking after your well-being. And you also have an academic coach who will be concerning themselves with your academic well-being, how you're doing on the courses. We have a well-being app for you to access, as well as a MyULaw app, which has a wealth of information, everything from your timetable to how to access support services like the study skills team. And also we have counsellors available to you 24/7, 365 days a year. So thinking more now about the courses themselves, let's have a look at the LPC. And I think even if you can't do it, it's really interesting to hear about it, to compare and contrast with the SQE. So a reminder then, you can only do the legal practice course if you started an undergraduate law degree in this jurisdiction before the 21st of September 2021, or an old style conversion course. You were enrolled on that by the 31st of August 2021. So what is in this LPC? Well, the LPC comes in various forms. Let's start on the far left-hand side. This is the diploma in legal practice, so the plain vanilla LPC. The SRA effectively prescribed what the LPC should look like, and they said that regardless of the provider, you needed to study core modules that they considered compulsory, and that you should also study 3 electives, 3 options. And we can look at those core modules and electives shortly. The University of Law also runs master's variants, if you like, of the LPC. And what you're getting here is a free master's, so no extra cost. And you're gaining extra modules, so with extra learning, extra content, extra skills. So the LPC MSc has obviously the core modules and the 3 electives of the LPC diploma. But in addition, it has a law and business module where you really get to grips with some how the economy works, looking at how the City of London works, and then crucially, how a law firm works, management techniques, marketing techniques. How do law firms grow? How do they expand? Do they do it organically? Do they acquire another law firm? Do they expand overseas? The law business module has a piece of coursework attached to that. And then the final piece of the jigsaw for the MSc is a freestanding piece of research, a business case study report that you complete in the run up to the end of the course. And you will have a short oral assessment on that, as well as submitting the piece of work. The beauty of the MSc, and indeed the LLM, is that they're at master's level. And so they open the door, if you haven't already done a master's and you haven't taken as well the student loan company funding for a master's, well, then they open the door to master's funding. The LLM LPC obviously has the core modules and 3 electives. You can do the law and business module if you like, and that piece of coursework, but most people doing the LLM do an extra elective. So they do 4 electives with obviously the exam that goes with that elective. And at the end of the LLM, rather than a business case study report, your independent piece of research is the professional practice research report. And that's research in a real sort of cutting area of the law in relation to the subjects you have studied. So perhaps you've done an elective on intellectual property and your professional practice research report is on a piece of relevant changes in the profession relating to IP. Let's look at those core modules then. Just coming up actually on the slide before I move on, an indication of the fees for the LPC. We talked about the fact that there's master's funding available if you haven't done a master's before. So the prices vary depending on whether you're at the London campuses or you're outside of London, the northern campuses being a little bit cheaper than the southern ones. So let's take a look at these core modules then. So remember, these were put in place by the Solicitors Regulation Authority. It's them that sort of said that you must study these areas. And do keep hold of these because you're going to see them again for the SQE. Well, let's deal with the 3 that probably jump off the slide as easily understood. So you study business law and practice. So this is knowledge and skills relating to businesses, so partnerships, limited liability partnerships, but above all companies. And this isn't academic law now. This is practical law. So how do companies achieve things? What about the board meeting? What about the shareholders meeting? Very practical study here, not academic law. Dispute resolution. So going all the way from a letter before action to judgment and costs. And the dispute resolution module also includes a little bit of criminal litigation. So again, not the underlying academic subject, but the practice of criminal litigation, in particular things like bail bail applications. And then real estate, as you might imagine, this isn't academic land law. This is about how you convey land, so whether it is freehold or leasehold, and also looking at commercial transactions as well. Introduction to professional practice is an array of subjects in there that the SRA consider compulsory. So there are some skills in there like legal writing, legal drafting, legal research, interviewing of a client. There are knowledge areas such as taxation, professional conduct, wills and probate. So a real array of subjects in Introduction to Professional Practice. And remember, on the legal practice course, you are effectively purchasing not only the course, but also the assessments. And there are an array of assessments on the LPC. So, for example, in Introduction to Professional Practice, you are doing coursework for legal research, legal writing, and legal drafting. There are multiple choice, open book multiple choice assessments for wills and professional conduct. Solicitors' accounts is also studied, and again, that's an open book assessment. And then the business law, dispute resolution, and real estate, well, then there's a short MCQ paper there, and then a much longer written paper, again, open book. So do hold on to that. You've bought the course and the assessment in a one-stop shop, and there's this array of different types of assessments, blending open book and also coursework. Very different to the SQE. Let's take a look at the electives now. So you choose 3 if you're doing the diploma, or if you're doing the MSc, you can choose 4 if you're doing the LLM. And we help students to choose. So we're able to have a little sort of, if you like, electives fair. Students can come along and talk to tutors and find out more about the subjects, and also can talk about what subjects to put together. It might be that you know already, or that your firm has told you what to study. So perhaps you're going to go to a London firm and you're going to do corporate subjects, banking, mergers and public companies. Or maybe you're going to a sort of medium-sized firm and you're going to choose commercial subjects. Or perhaps you want to keep your options open and you're going to do some from each of these lists. So you're going to do, let us say, private client together with employment law and mergers and acquisitions. That's absolutely fine. Some subjects don't go brilliantly together, but we advise students on that. Each elective has obviously a course that you will be on, and then at the end of it there is an assessment, short MCQs, followed by a written paper, and again, open book. So that hopefully gives you a feel for the LPC. Sort of bank that information then as we compare and contrast it with the SQE, the Solicitors Qualifying Examination. So let's take a look then at the assessments first of all, because that is what you have to pass, and then we'll look at how we can support you through various preparation courses. So get some fundamentals under our belt then. What about this SQE1? Well, as you can see, it is called the Functioning Legal Knowledge Assessment, FLK. That's what the SRA call it. And SQE1 then is testing your knowledge and indeed your application of that knowledge to short scenarios. So as you can see, it's testing your ability to recall information, but also your ability to identify key legal principles as they apply to a client's problem. And they do that by way of single best answer questions. So as you can see from the top of the slide, you will be over the course of 2 days sitting two papers worth of 180 single best answer questions. In fact, they split it down. So you arrive on day 1 and you do 90 single best answer questions, short break, and then a further 90. Come back a couple of days later and do the whole thing again. So day 1, you're faced with 180 single best answer questions. And what is a single best answer question? Well, I'm going to give you a bit more of a feel for that in just a moment. But the long and the short of it is that you have a short scenario. So 180 short scenarios followed by 5 suggested answers. And potentially, because they're single best answer questions, potentially up to 5 of the answers are correct. and you're looking for the best answer. Sometimes there are true distractors, so in other words, an answer that is just wrong. But it is possible for there to be 5 correct answers, but 1 is the best answer. So all told, over your 2 days, you're doing 10 hours of assessments, and you have about 1 minute, 40 seconds for each of those short scenarios and to choose your one of your 5 options. And where are you doing this? You're doing it away from your provider. You don't sit at the University of Law, you sit at a Pearson VUE Centre. And you may have been to one of those if you've done your driving theory test. So day 1 then, look at the subjects. Isn't that interesting? So business law, dispute resolution, and legal services, very much drawn from the legal practice course. Those core modules, aren't they? Sort of professional conduct and financial services, drawn from introduction to professional practice and business law and dispute resolution. You've seen those. They're practical subjects. They're on the LPC. And look what they're mixed with. They're mixed with the academic subjects from your undergrad or your law conversion. And that is why, although the SRA say you don't need a law degree or a conversion, it's going to be very difficult to pass SQE1 if you don't have knowledge of contract and tort and the legal system of England and Wales and public law. And similarly on day 2, property law and practice, wills and the administration of estates, solicitor's accounts, and criminal practice, all from the LPC. Whereas you're also being assessed on land law and trusts and the underlying academic subject of criminal law. So it's interesting, isn't it? This mixture of academic law and practical LPC type law. So in other words, when you do the LPC, the SRA assume you've been assessed on your law degree and your conversion. They don't need to assess you again. The SQE assumes you need to be assessed again on that underlying academic law. So you take SQE1, and only if you have taken and passed it can you move on to SQE2. So you cannot attempt SQE2, the second assessment, unless you have passed SQE1. And the second assessment is in skills. So now you're being tested on your practical skills, but you're being assessed within the context areas of SQE1, those practical context areas of SQE1. The good news is those academic subjects from your undergraduate law degree and conversion don't apply to SQE2. So SQE2, there's quite a lot to do. So all told, it's about 14 hours. And although it adds up to about 3.5 days, actually it's spread out over about 5 days. You've got 16 assessments to attempt, some written, some oral. I'll show you those in a moment. And you are basically dealing with very practical scenarios and you're displaying your skills. And notice the standard. You're being assessed to the standard of the newly competent, the newly qualified solicitor. The LPC assesses to the standard of day 1 of a training contract. So SQE2 is effectively the end of the training contract. You're just about to start your real job. So let's look at the skills that's being tested then. So you've got effectively 2 days when you're dealing with client interviewing and advocacy, so oral skills. And then you've got the remaining time, so adding up to a further sort of 3.5 days of legal research, legal writing, legal drafting that you'll know of. You've heard of those on the LPC, and a new skill, case matter analysis. So case matter analysis, sort of thing you do before you launch into some dispute resolution on behalf of your client. You look at all the facts of the matter. You analyze the client's position. You look at the law. And then you say to the client, well, you know, this is our case. This is the evidence that's missing. This is how, you know, likely how we feel, how strong our case is, that sort of thing. So all those skills then, you can see there, those 6 skills are assessed across 5 knowledge areas, and they are the practical knowledge areas of criminal practice, criminal litigation, dispute resolution, property, wills, and business law. So, you know, you might go along to your interviewing assessment and it's in the context of, let's say, wills and probate, but your advocacy assessment is in the context of criminal litigation and so on. All closed book though. Both SQE1 and SQE2 are both closed book. In other words, you can have no notes with you. There's no coursework element, no open book element. It has to all be memorized. And you go along again to a central assessment venue to do these assessments. Now, because you're going along to a central assessment venue, it is not run by your provider, at the University of Law in our case, and therefore you need to pay to do the assessments and you need to pay the SRA. So before you can sit these assessments, you register on the SRA's website, so you've got your SQE account, and then when the booking window opens, you book your sit. And remember, you book your sit for the SQE1, but you can't book SQE2 until you've passed SQE1. You get 3 attempts at SQE1 and 3 attempts at SQE2 over a period of 6 years. And you can get reasonable adjustments. You apply to the SRA through their portal to get those. And then let's look at the exams in a little bit more detail. So they happen at certain points in the year that the SRA decide. There are going to be increasingly more sittings, in particular SQE2. There's lots of talk of there being more sittings. But notice the cost. So it is £1,662 that you pay to the SRA to sit the exam, £2,493 that you pay to the SRA to sit SQE2. So when you're doing preparation courses, you pay the provider for the teaching, for the course that you're doing. You pay the SRA for the assessment. So very different to the LPC. In terms of supporting you through that, the University of Law has, rather like with the LPC, we have an LLM. This time it's an LLM in legal practice, which covers the SQE1 and SQE2. We also have freestanding SQE1 and 2 preparation courses. So if we take a look at this, then you can see that our LLM in legal practice has various start points. So it has March and September, the full-time course, January and June, part-time courses, part-time day, part-time weekend, part-time evening. And within your LLM in legal practice, you get your SQE1 and 2 preparation courses, but you also get extra modules that raise this course to the master's level and, of course, gives you extra knowledge, extra skills, and opens the door to the student loan company funding for a master's qualification. So that gives you a feel then for the sort of support we can give you. If we drill down into that LLM in legal practice, you can see a little bit more of the course content. Now, one of the things you perhaps noticed when I was covering off the SQE exam is that the SQE exam is very focused on the academic law, SQE1, and the core modules of the LPC. The electives from the LPC have disappeared in the SQE world. The SRA did not factor them in to their SQE exam, much to the disappointment of the firms. So the firms wanted to sort of, if you like, plug back in those electives, the knowledge and the skills. And so the sponsoring firms are, by and large, putting their students through an LLM in legal practice. And there you're getting the SQE1 and 2 prep courses, but you're getting extra knowledge and skills that plug back in that knowledge and skills that the LPC had. So the LLM in legal practice at the University of Law has a preparation for practice module, which gives more sort of commercial and well-rounded lawyerly skills, a real understanding of what it is to be a practicing lawyer. It gives you a chance to choose 3 key practice areas. So this is reminiscent of the electives. And it also gives you an opportunity to either focus on the business of law, a bit like the MSc when we were dealing with the LPC. So you're doing professional effectiveness, really understanding how law firms work with their clients, plus an additional, if you like, sort of slim key practice area to choose from that you can see on the slide. Or you do a 7,500 word sort of independent research report. And everything that you see on the slide, all the modules here, are assessed by the University of Law, not the SRA, and they're assessed by way of coursework. So the SQE, as you know, is all central assessment venue and closed book, memory, test, if you like, whereas the LLM in legal practice, additional modules are all coursework. So where's the advantage of doing the LLM? Because after all, it is a little bit more expensive than just doing the preparation courses. Well, obviously, because of that preparation for practice module and the business and professional services modules, you're getting these sort of key skills, key knowledge, rounded knowledge areas that used to be delivered on the LPC. You're able to really focus on specific modules that will help you in the sectors that the law firm you want to work for deals in by doing those key practice areas. We've also able to help you with your personal learning journey because we have what we call learner analytics. So particularly for SQE1, you and we can see how you're faring on practice assessments for SQE1, and it can give you a feel about, well, I'm about to spend this money on the SQE1. Am I ready to attempt this exam? And then obviously lots of help with your career in terms of that support that you would expect from our employability team. Talking about this learner journey then and sort of preparation for the SQE1 assessment, we have an app which you can access through your mobile phone or your laptop. And what you're getting here is you're getting access to compulsory weekly practice tests for SQE1. As you can see from SQE1, and as I've described it with those single best answer questions, obviously there's two things going on there. You're getting a lot of knowledge, and you're also in the workshop learning how to use that knowledge and practical skills in an office environment. But you've also got to learn how to pass SQE1. There's a skill in that. So the consolidation that I talked about, and indeed these, which is part of, you can see here on the slide, these weekly practice tests, you get to practice those quick fire, 1 minute, 40 seconds scenario and selecting the appropriate single best answer. So you get to access those compulsory weekly tests. We and you can see the dashboard with how you're getting on. And so you can see areas that perhaps you're weaker at and you need to home in on, and we can help you with that. You can also curate your own little practice tests on the app, which is very, very useful. And so from your perspective, that means that, once you've identified that maybe land law and trust is a little bit weak, you can make sure that the app can help you by delivering more practice tests in those areas. And then we also have, as part of our SQE prep courses and of course the LLM, mock assessments so that you can practice that SQE testing, of course, for SQE1 and indeed SQE2. You don't want to go to that exam without being absolutely sure that you're going to be in the best possible position to pass. Let's now look at the sort of pros and cons, if you like, of the various routes. So if you are able to do the LPC route or the SQE route, how on earth will you know which way to go? Well, the LPC has got a lot of pluses, and that is that it is tried and tested. It's been around since the 1990s, and the law firms know exactly what they are getting by way of this course. It obviously gives you the chance not only to study the core areas, but to choose electives that would perhaps suit you or make you particularly attractive to a firm, or that a firm particularly wants you to study because they're sponsoring you. It's a one-stop shop. You know exactly where you stand. The fees are incorporating both the course and the assessments. And if closed book isn't for you, well, then the LPC has this wide range of assessments that perhaps play to your strengths in terms of coursework and open book. And of course, funding is well established for the LPC. Not only, of course, do we have those master's options, but the high street banks will lend by way of career development loans for the LPC. What about the SQE? Well, it might be cheaper, but you do need to be careful here. Remember that you are paying the provider for the course that prepares you for the assessment, but of course you have to pay for the assessment separately. So you do need to factor that in and not forget that there is the cost of the assessment to add on. Of course, the qualifying work experience is very different to a training contract. Remember, you can get it at up to 4 organisations, and those organisations don't have to be a law firm. It could be even a charity or the Citizens Advice Bureau, as I've said. It could be somebody who's not actually paying you. It's also possible for those who are paralegals to bank their paralegal work as qualifying work experience. It's also possible on the LPC route potentially to do that, but it's more complicated. And the SRA have sort of moved on that by being, admittedly much more flexible here. So for people who are working, doing paralegal work, they might just be in one department, they're not being moved around the firm, but they can bank that paralegal work as qualifying work experience by downloading from the SRA's website. There's a very useful template there that you can complete to show your qualifying work experience, to show that you've hit those skills and knowledges that are in the statement of competency on the SRA's website. And it must, of course, remember, be signed off by a solicitor who is qualified in this jurisdiction. So that's obviously a positive. I want to just offer a few words of caution here. All of that is true about banking paralegal work. However, you do need to be careful here. On the one hand, if you were then to secure qualifying work experience with a firm that you saw as your future employer, you may well bring along your template and say, look, I've got 6 months or 1 year's worth of qualifying work experience. That firm is perfectly within its rights to say, well done, but I'm not accepting it. They are within their rights to say, look, I'm dealing with that as just work experience, and I now insist that you do 2 years qualifying work experience with me. And, I will promote you to be an assistant solicitor at the end of those 2 years. Or a firm might say, all right, I'll accept 6 months of it. And I can think of one firm based on the South Coast. Their position is that they take each person, on a case-by-case basis. They look at their template or whatever, at their qualifying work experience, and they will take a view as to whether they will accept it. But under no circumstances will this firm accept more than a year, because they want their incoming qualifying work experience people to be, whatever we're going to call them, to be trained at least in part in their way, in their systems. My other caveat is, if you are a paralegal and you are beavering away doing your paralegal work, and then you go off yourself to, let's say, part-time, unbeknownst to the firm, to study and pass the SQE1 and SQE2, and then present yourself to your firm saying, well, I know you employed me as a paralegal, but look at me, I've passed SQE1 and SQE2, I'm now qualified. Again, the firm doesn't have to accept that. They can say, well done, yes, you are qualified, but here's the situation. I employed you as a paralegal and I'm not promoting you. Now, they are within their rights to do that. Obviously, you can then go to another firm as a qualified solicitor and work for them. But what I'm saying is that there are some caveats here. And the key thing is that if you fall into either of the two circumstances I've just talked about, you need to get a dialogue going with the firms in question, find out their position, be open with them so that everybody knows where they stand. And then finally, the SQE obviously doesn't have electives, and that was a real disappointment to the firms when the SQE was introduced. But obviously, that can be overcome by doing preparation courses like our LLM in legal practice that includes extra modules. Now, another issue for you, of course, is timing. So I'm sure this is the million-dollar question for most of you. It's like, well, the LPC might well suit me better, but what if I do the LPC and I can't find a training contract? I mean, that is obviously one of the main concerns that I have come across over the last year or so. So this brings us to timeline, doesn't it? Some firms are going to want their incoming, let's call them trainees, to qualify in the same way. So in other words, they're having a big bang approach. They were doing LPC and training contracts, and then they have a wholesale switch to SQE and qualifying work experience. And that's the case with the Magic Circle in London and some of the very large firms in London. They tend to have already switched to the SQE in September 2022. So they're starting qualifying work experience in 2023. But, those firms recruit 2 years out. So those people have been recruited already. Many of the other London and larger regional firms, many of them aren't switching to qualifying work experience until 2024. I think in particular the pandemic pushed them back on that. It became a little bit tricky for them to deal with the pandemic and this big change. So a number of those substantial firms are switching to qualifying work experience in 2024. So SQE from 2023. So again, those people may have already been recruited. It depends when those firms recruit. Some firms may not have a hard deadline, and some of the sort of medium to smaller firms, particularly in the region that I deal with in the southeast, are being a little bit more flexible. Yeah, they're going to have a soft deadline on this, and for the right candidate, they don't mind. You know, if it's an LPC candidate, well then fine, they'll run a training contract. If it's SQE, they'll run qualifying work experience. And for many of those firms, there's a couple of reasons for that. One is they already have a myriad of people coming in. They've already got apprentices. They've already got SILEX, so legal execs, and trainees. So to have another variation doesn't bother them. The other reason is most firms are saying, well, look, I know in qualifying work experience, I can drop somebody just into one department. I don't have to move them around the firm. I don't have to give them exposure to contentious work. But I know I can, but I'm not going to. Yeah, in other words, my qualifying work experience is going to look just like a training contract. So therefore, it doesn't matter to me if somebody arrives with an LPC, I'm running a training contract, but it looks just like qualifying work experience. So it depends on the firm. So what I can say to you is this. Have a look at their websites to see what they're saying about the transition. And if you're in any doubt, talk to them. Have they moved already? Have they got a hard deadline? And so on. In terms of that $1 million question that I just mentioned, in other words, what if I do the LPC and I can't find a training contract? Well, if you've done the LPC, the position from the SRA's side is this. You can put the LPC with qualifying work experience. However, because the qualifying work experience, if you remember, doesn't assess you as to your competency to join the profession, it was the SQE2 that does that, you have to do the SQE2 as well. So having the LPC isn't by no means fatal. You can do qualifying work experience, but in order to fully qualify, you would need to do SQE2 at the end of that qualifying work experience, but then you'd have done the LPC, you'd have done your qualifying work experience. You'd like to think that you would be very successful in SQE2 in those circumstances. Who knows, maybe even the firm would pay for you to do that. Talking to the firms, as I say, some are very, very flexible, and some are saying, yeah, sure, okay, if you've got an LPC, I'll take you, you'll do qualifying work experience, but yes, you will then have to do SQE2, and I understand that. So, there is some flexibility out there, and it is not fatal, therefore, to have the LPC. If you've got the SQE and can't find qualifying work experience but get a training contract, that also is fine, because the SRA are clear on their website that a training contract counts as qualifying work experience. But do remember, the transition has started. So either you can, get the benefit of that transition, or you cannot. And so, if you can't, well, then you have no choice. You have to do the SQE.